Chapter 147. In Hero, Fujio was still distributing equipment to her teammates. She was very generous to those who supported her in the whole server. She shared all the diamonds that dropped from the first kill with the captains of all the major teams. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Got the best equipment. Fujio had to admit that she was being selfish in this aspect. After all, he was her future teammate. But the others didn't mind. After all, they weren't professional players, so they didn't need to collect materials. They liked more practical things, like diamonds. They didn't care about the other things, so they naturally listened to Fujio's arrangements. To thank them, Fujio even gave them a 20% discount for this order. Seeing this, Qin Mo's right hand that was holding the mouse paused slightly. His deep eyes swept over the computer screen and landed on the two characters who were still whispering to each other. His eyes gradually turned cold. In fact, the main reason why Qin Mo didn't make a move in the beginning was that those two were too close. Did they need to be so close to each other just to play a game? Although he wouldn't interfere too much with young people's business. After all, no one wanted to be controlled when they were 16 or 17 years old. But there were some principles that couldn't be violated. Until now, Qin Mo still hadn't forgotten that this guy in front of him had liked a man. Idol, are you giving all these to me? Feng Shang didn't expect that his idol would think of him like this even with the Almighty around. Fujio held a lollipop in her mouth, tilted her head, and replied with a line of text. It'll be useful in the esports competition. I know your skills pretty well. In a few days, our team will meet up, and we'll go to the internet cafe to play a game together. The two of them were chatting in private, so the others only saw that Fujio and Feng Shang's characters were very close. After Feng Shang saw that message, he made a sound of surprise before replying, Idol, did you forget that our team only has you and me? Now it's 3. Fujio smiled, and the corners of her mouth were full of mischief. That's why I'm online today. Besides, our new teammate is a girl. Feng Shang was shocked, and he typed faster. Girl? Where is she? I didn't see her. I always thought that we would be a single team. Idol, why you're not lying to me, are you? Baby Feng, as a team member, you must have absolute trust in your team leader. How could I lie to you? Fujio looked at his reaction, and her smile widened. And our new teammate has a good personality. She's a nice girl. Feng Shang didn't care what kind of girl she was. He had already thought about how he would greet his new teammates when they met in a few days. Yep, I'll just say that I'll bring her to clear dungeons, fly her, and buy her equipment. He would ask his brother to top up more money for him. While the two of them were chatting happily, the handsome side face of the man on the other side turned cold bit by bit. Fujio was still typing and didn't notice. Qin Mo laughed. His smile was vicious no matter how one looked at it. He placed the cup back in its original position, stood up, and walked towards the youngster on the bed step by step. Chapter 148. Chatting so happily? Qin Mo's voice had always been light, and it sounded even more so at night. It was as if he didn't care about anything, but there was an irresistible coldness in his voice. After hearing the Almighty's question, Fujio raised her head and found that the man was already in front of her. He was standing by the bed with a physics book in his hand. His khaki trousers made him look a lot softer, but the pressure he exuded was still very strong, and he still had the domineering aura of a military third generation. How should she put it? It was a little cool, but also a little cold. The most important thing was that those eyes didn't seem to be very happy. Fujio was still sucking on her lollipop. She didn't know what was going on, but that was what she thought. According to her understanding of the Almighty, he would attack her verbally when he was in a bad mood. Later, she just needed to find a way to flirt with the Almighty, and this problem would be solved. But, to Fujio's surprise, the Almighty didn't play by the rules at all. He asked her again, do you like men or women? Such an elegant and direct question indeed needed a good answer. If she said she liked men, the Almighty would probably throw her out by the collar. If she said she liked women, she didn't want to lie, because it was against her will. But, girls are cute, and boys are handsome. Fujio smiled with her beautiful peach blossom eyes. She twirled her silver hair with her fingers, and she looked like a rich young master. She leaned against the headboard, looking very handsome and evil. They're all okay. The most important thing is the face. I'm okay with those who are good-looking. All okay. Qin Mo curled up his lips slowly, looking unhappy and playful. You want to say that you like both men and women? Fu Jiu put on a serious face. Being too handsome will always bring this kind of burden. Who gave you such strong confidence? Qin Mo's voice was very calm. Fu Jiu thought about it and said seriously, my parents gave birth to me well. But Brother Mo, don't worry. Even if I like men, I won't do anything to you. With this answer, there shouldn't be any problem. The Almighty was probably asking her this question because of what she had done before, like wanting to keep the Almighty as a mistress. Fu Jiu analyzed the reason while replying to Baby Feng's message. She didn't notice the cold light flashing in the man's eyes after he heard her words. If Secretary Liang saw this expression on his CEO's face, he would definitely break into a cold sweat. Because Qin Mo wasn't too happy right now. Almighty Qin thought that no one would want their little brother to have such a rich private life. He was the same. Eating both men and women? What a great ability. Qin Mo glanced at the silver-haired youngster who was still hugging his notebook and chatting away. His expression didn't change at all. His face was still as handsome as a god. His slender fingers moved and directly unbuttoned his trousers. Fu Jiu looked at the man's action, and her typing hand suddenly stopped. The man standing at the head of the bed stood tall and straight like a pine tree in the Tsang Mountain. He was very attractive. His every movement was calm and elegant, as if everything was under his control. But, what was going on? Why did the Almighty take off his pants? Chapter 149. Brother Mo, what are you doing? Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes slowly, but she was still smiling, looking as handsome as ever. Qin Mo's voice was indifferent. Sleep, of course. But this is my room. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows to remind him. Qin Mo snorted and suddenly bent over. He put his left hand on the bed beside Fu Jiu, and his aura enveloped her. Even that godlike handsome face of his was very close. His hair was as black as the night, adding a bit of evil to his noble aura. Even the few strands of bangs casually falling on his fair forehead made him look unbelievably handsome. He looked at her with an inexplicable heat in his eyes. When his slightly deep voice entered her ears, it was like an expensive red wine swirling slowly. Don't you want to sleep on the same bed with me? Today, Big Brother will fulfill your wish. There was even a hint of mockery in that indifferent voice. Don't think that she couldn't tell that the Almighty was doing it on purpose. Fu Jiu was depressed. Haven't we already turned the page? Who gave you that illusion? The man raised his eyebrows and did not have the slightest intention to leave. Fu Jiu smiled. Her thin lips curled up, and she got closer to the man. But I like men. Brother Mo, aren't you afraid of me? Qin Mo's fingers paused, and then he pulled the young man away. He pressed Fu Jiu against the headboard, and with a faint smile, he said in an even colder tone, behave yourself when you're sleeping. If you move even a little bit, I'll make you the last in physics class. Fu Jiu. Didn't he promise to help her guess the questions? How could the Almighty change so quickly? But they slept together. It wouldn't be good for her if she was found out. Fu Jiu's eyes curved as she thought of this. How can I control this? Brother Mo is so handsome. It's a test for me to sleep next to him. Really? Qin Mo chuckled. His lips were cold. You better control yourself. Don't stretch your hand over. Otherwise, I might chop off your claws. Fu Jiu was dispirited. Brother Mo, you are a man too. You should understand that sometimes you really can't control yourself. Qin Mo looked at the troubled youngster. Fu Jiu put on an evil and handsome face. You get it, right? To be honest, I don't really understand. Qin Mo's voice was calm. His side profile elegant and handsome. After all, I'm not gay. No matter how handsome a man sleeps beside me, I won't feel anything. Fu Jiu. All right, even if Brother Mo can't feel it, what if I attack you? Qin Mo arched a brow. You can't control yourself? I really don't have good self-control. Fu Jiu put her arm around Qin Mo's shoulder like a good brother. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to nightclubs so often. So, Almighty, go back to your room and sleep. Fu Jiu naturally wouldn't say the last sentence out loud. She only used a pair of electric eyes to express her emotions. Qin Mo took the youngster's hand away, his smile turning colder. Since you have no self-control, I'll help you control it. Before Fu Jiu could react, Qin Mo reached out and grabbed the tie on the sofa. He tied the youngster's right wrist and the other end to the headboard. Chapter 150. The young man's appearance on the bed was very pleasing to the eye, especially his face, which was almost as fair as porcelain jade under the pure white cotton pajamas he was wearing. His silver hair was handsome, his face was handsome, and his thin lips were curled up. At that moment, there was an indescribable feeling that made people's hearts beat faster. Qin Mo glanced at him and stood up. He raised his right hand and covered the young man's head and face under the quilt. Out of sight, out of mind. He really needed to be disciplined. If you go to those dirty places again, it won't be as simple as just tying you up. Qin Mo always knew that the young man was good-looking, but he didn't expect that he had such a side to him. He was lying there like a porcelain doll. Qin Mo suddenly remembered a gathering in the courtyard. In the private room, there was a young boy who called them Big Brother when he came in. He didn't know why, but he always felt a little repulsed when he thought about it. The only thing he was sure of was that he didn't want his little brother to be like that. Qin Mo usually didn't care about someone's sexual orientation. But today it was different. How could his little brother be under someone else's bed? Qin Mo turned around. His back was as straight as the desert. Contrary to his fiery thoughts, his deep eyes were cold, so cold that they almost affected the surrounding temperature. Fu Jiu's unbound hand was hanging by the side of the bed. She pulled the quilt away, and the Almighty had already entered the bathroom. It seemed that she couldn't avoid it this time. But judging from the Almighty's reaction, he seemed to dislike her a little. Nothing should happen. Fu Jiu moved her right hand again, and a light flashed in her black eyes. This knot wasn't simple. It looked ordinary, but it was actually very professional. The cross was hard to untie, even with a knife. The Almighty was indeed not easy to deal with. There shouldn't be anyone on the mainland who could study criminal psychology and make such a binding technique. If there was, shouldn't it be the police? Or maybe the Almighty's ability to leave meant that he was free from control. Fu Jiu suddenly closed her eyes when she thought of this. After a few seconds, she opened them again. Her eyes were unfathomable and mysterious. Then she whistled with great interest. If the Almighty hadn't recognized her as his little brother, she would have competed with him. She wanted to see who was better, her or the Almighty. However, this wish was unlikely to come true. Speaking of wishes, if she had known earlier, she wouldn't have bragged to Baby Feng. Now, he had even blown himself into it. Fu Jiu tilted her head and continued to fiddle with the black tie. Just as she was about to untie it, the Almighty appeared again. He looked like he had just taken a shower. His black hair was still damp, but he was fundamentally different from Fu Jiu. Even in this state, Qin Mo's presence was strong. He didn't take a towel and slowly strode over. After scanning her movements, his thin lips curved. "You're really capable, my little brother." Not as good as Brother Mo. Fu Jiu moved her hand again. "But I want to pee now, what should I do?" Qin Mo seemed to have predicted that the youngster would come up with such an excuse. He lifted his eyebrows and said calmly, "Get up, I'll go with you." Chapter 151. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster's fluffy head and slightly withered expression. His voice returned to its deep tone. "That's why I said, don't play tricks in front of me. I'm tying you up now to let you know that you shouldn't flirt so casually in the future. Regardless of whether it's in real life or in the game, men and women are the same." What else could Fu Jiu say? The tone of an elder brother instructing his younger brother. It was rare that her male idol did not continue to attack her. However, Qin Mo's next move made Fu Jiu pause. Qin Mo took off his shirt cleanly, which made him look even cooler. Perhaps it was because his figure was too good. Even without any accessories, the man just stood there inexplicably gave people a hazy and inviolable feeling. The Almighty was definitely the kind of person who didn't care about dogma. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played games even though he had a family business. Not to mention that he would tie her up just like that. Fu Jiu was looking directly at Qin Mo from her position. It would be weird if she looked away. Plus, she couldn't get tired of looking at the Almighty's body. She simply put her arm behind her head, using it as a cushion, and looked at the man from head to toe with pure admiration. Qin Mo would drink a glass of wine before he slept. His upper body was half naked, his slender and fair fingers holding the glass. He raised his head and took a sip. His seductive waist and well-defined chest revealed the black qilin at his waist as he moved. When Fu Jiu wanted to take a closer look, her line of sight met that pair of deep, rippling eyes. He lowered his head and stared at her. His glowing thin lips were very close to her, as if even his breath could hit her lips. Why don't you mention the other requirements? Like helping you take off your pajamas? Take off my pajamas? What a joke. How could pajamas be taken off so casually? Even if he was wrapped in bandages and wearing a hurdle vest underneath, he couldn't take off his pajamas. Fu Jiu smiled and said calmly, Brother Mo, I don't need to trouble you with these trivial matters. I like to sleep with my clothes on. Really? This time, Qin Mo didn't say much. He turned to the side and took off the watch on his wrist. He placed it by the bedside and turned off the light, leaving only a weak light beside the bedside. Then he took off his trousers, which he had already unbuttoned. His tall and slender figure lay down beside Fu Jiu. His nose was high, and in the dark, he gave off an indescribable sense of asceticism. Very few people could be so luxurious and indifferent in this situation. Fu Jiu didn't care about Fu Jiu at all. The people in the outside world were right. If they used Almighty Qin's sleeping face as a poster, Supreme Alliance would definitely become even more popular. When he was sleeping alone, it felt very big, but with another person, it felt a little different. Especially when the other person's aura was too strong, this feeling would be magnified infinitely. Fu Jiu moved her hand that was leaning on the side of the bed and turned over. Fu Jiu could still smell the faint scent of tobacco. This scent came from another person, and it made Fu Jiu want to turn her head around. It was because she had never slept with anyone before. Chapter 152. Under his body? When Fu Jiu heard these words, she raised the corner of her lips devilishly. Brother Mo, you must have misunderstood something. Even if I'm gay, I'm not the one on the bottom. Qin Mo didn't say anything. He just turned his face sideways and glanced at the youngster indifferently. Strangely, Fu Jiu saw the doubt in his eyes. Now was not the right time. She had to find a chance to knock the Almighty against the wall and show him how aggressive she was. In bed, it was better for her not to cause any more trouble. If the joke went too far, the Almighty might tear her pajamas when he made a move, and that would not be worth it. So even though Fu Jiu untied her wrists, she didn't turn over and press Qin Mo under her body. It was okay to think about it, but the consequences would be huge. As she thought about it, she felt sleepy without realizing it. In fact, it was already very late, and the hand of the clock was already at 12 o'clock. The two of them played badminton in the day, studied physics at night, and got the first kill again. This was mentally and physically exhausting. And Fu Jiu had even assembled a notebook the day before. Now that it was quiet all around, she closed her eyes. Qin Mo thought that the youngster would say something, but after a while, he realized that he had already fallen asleep. His long eyelashes cast a faint shadow under his eyes, and his quiet handsome face made the youngster look so harmless, like an angel who had fallen to the mortal world. Qin Mo stared at that face for a minute before covering himself with the quilt and closing his eyes as well. After autumn, the temperature in the north could drop by 6 or 7 degrees a day. Especially at night, when the north wind blew, the raindrops hit the window, making it even colder. Qin Mo and Fu Jiu both forgot to turn on the heater, and this cold current came too suddenly. Unconsciously, Fu Jiu, who was afraid of the cold, leaned against the warm spot. The next day, the first rays of the morning sun shone through the swaying curtains. Don't think that the weather would get warmer at this time. Sometimes, the early morning at the end of autumn was even colder than the middle of the night. Fu Jiu moved her hands, and she got closer and closer to that warm spot. Who was so nice as to arrange such a big hot water bag for her on the bed? It was so warm. Fu Jiu couldn't help hugging that warmth and rubbing her face against it. But the moment she opened her eyes, all of her thoughts became clear. The thing she was hugging wasn't a hot water bag, but the Almighty. Qin Mo seemed to have woken up just a little earlier than her. The light shone on his elegant and handsome face, making him look ambiguous. Compared to his appearance, his eyes were even more beautiful, like black gemstones. His messy black hair made him look even more charming. At this moment, Qin Mo was looking at her. His eyes were so deep that it seemed like they could suck a person in. The two of them were very close to each other. Her lips were pressed against his chest, and their legs were unknowingly placed together. Their posture was very intimate. The two of them were so close that they were so close to each other. Of. Emo Qin Jiu of Emo suddenly of Qin of. His aura surrounded her from all directions. Chapter 153. Qin Mo's eyes were still dark and a little unfocused, as if he wasn't fully awake yet. Fu Jiu knew that there was a type of person like this. Their eyes were open, but their thoughts weren't. Under normal circumstances, such people were not only very smart, but also very vigilant. Fu Jiu's first reaction was that her identity as a girl must not be exposed. Without a second thought, he arched his knees, separating the two of them from each other. She was very glad that she stuffed a ball of paper in her crotch to make it look bulging. But there was still a difference between paper and a man's lower body. She just didn't know how much of Qin Mo's consciousness had recovered. Fu Jiu's action made Qin Mo's eyes gradually clear up. Along with that cold light, his lower body seemed to be more awake. It was pressed against Fu Jiu's knees, and it was very obvious that it was burning. Qin Mo's back seemed to pause for a moment when he sensed the change in himself. He frowned suddenly, moved his big hands, lifted the quilt, and sat up directly on the bed. To create more chaos, Fu Jiu smiled handsomely and sat up as well. Her white face was very close, and her silver hair was half curled up. Even her breath hit Qin Mo's ear as she curled her thin lips into an evil smile. Brother Mo, it's nothing. Men are always more energetic when they wake up in the morning. It has nothing to do with who is lying next to you. Qin Mo's handsome face was cold and restrained, and he looked down slightly at the head of the bed. His magnetic voice sounded like it was laced with sand, low, husky, and cold. It made a woman's soul go numb when she heard it. Looks like I have to tie your hands the next time I tie you up. Fu Jiu. Wait, she wasn't the one who was reacting. Why tie her hands? Alas, the Almighty had already pushed her away and stood up. His expression was very cold. He took a towel and walked into the bathroom. In other words, she didn't even have a chance to refute. This was such an injustice. However, the Almighty's attention wouldn't be on her this time. Fu Jiu lowered her eyes and looked at the slightly bulging ball in her pants. A man's judgment wouldn't be accurate when he was half asleep, which was why Fu Jiu dared to sleep with the Almighty. Coupled with the Almighty's reaction just now, his thoughts should only be focused on his lower body. Ba. The purest physical reaction of a man had saved her. Sleeping was something that only happened once. There would never be a second time. That was what Fu Jiu told herself, but since ancient times, there had always been a decisive gap between imagination and reality. The shower in the bathroom was running noisily, but there was no steam rising. The cold water droplets dripped onto the man's honey-colored muscular chest just like that. Every inch of his abdominal muscles was extremely sexy. That kind of hardness only made people want to be hugged in his arms and loved fiercely. Qin Mo tilted his head, his perfectly trimmed black hair slightly covering his eyes. The lower half of his body was still moving. Under such circumstances, the Almighty was the only one who could remain indifferent. Perhaps it had something to do with his background. While Qin Mo was extremely seductive, there was also an indescribable sense of tranquility around him. It was as though all the noise could be stopped in front of him. But even Qin Mo couldn't figure out why he had such a reaction. He was pretty sure he wasn't bent. Was it because he had been too angry recently? Chapter 154. After the incident in the morning, Qin Mo's mood was obviously not as good as last night. His handsome face was full of unfriendliness. Fu Jiu had changed from her pajamas into her school uniform. She had silver hair, a light smile, and a school bag on one shoulder. She looked handsome and energetic. She looked like she had a good sleep. People seldom came to the house. Now that the young man was here, Aunt Zhang made 4 types of breakfast in one go. Fried buns, fried dough sticks, small meat buns, and vegetable porridge. She smiled and asked Fujiu to eat more. Fujiu naturally wouldn't refuse this kindness. She enjoyed it very much, especially the fried buns. They were golden yellow in color, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. They were delicious. But Fujiu couldn't finish a whole plate by herself. The Almighty only drank milk in the morning and read the business newspaper in his hands. Obviously, he didn't want to finish them for her. Fujiu couldn't bear to let Aunt Zhang down, so she put the remaining pieces in the takeaway box. Aunt Zhang was happy to see this. Young Master Zhou has so many friends. Our young master never thought of bringing breakfast for his classmates. It's not that I have many friends, but my desk mate is nice to me. Fujiu smiled. I want her to taste Aunt Zhang's cooking. Aunt Zhang loved to listen to the young man. Seeing that Fujiu was about to go to school, she waved at the door reluctantly. Remember to come with young master next time. Madam will be there too. Madam will like young Master Zhou. Okay. Fujiu sat in the car and curled up her lips at Aunt Zhang. Qin Mo was sitting next to the young man. He glanced at the extra box of fried buns in the young man's hands indifferently. After a while, he ordered the driver in a cold voice. Drive. Yes, young master. Although the driver could tell that his young master's tone wasn't very good, he still followed Qin Mo's order and went to Zhang City No. 1 Middle School first. The Qin family's car was very eye-catching, whether it was the model or the license plate. Fortunately, there weren't many students at school at this time. However, when the car appeared, it still attracted a lot of attention. Shui Yaoyao was memorizing English with her headphones on, but after seeing the unusual reaction, she looked to her side. A silver-haired young man walked out of the extended black Lincoln. The corners of the young man's mouth were curled up, with a youthful handsomeness and mischievousness. Who else could it be but His Highness Zhou? When Shui Yaoyao saw that face, she quickly walked over. Good morning, Your Highness Zhou. As soon as Fujiu got out of the car, she turned her head and saw Shui Yaoyao's smiling face. She turned her eyes to Qin Mo and said, Brother Mo, I'll be leaving first. Be careful on the road. After saying that, Fujiu waved her hand and walked towards Shui Yaoyao with a smile while carrying her black school bag on one shoulder and one hand in her pocket. Shui Yaoyao watched as the youngster walked closer and closer, her face turning red. She was so excited to see Highness Zhou that she forgot that they were at the school gate. She didn't know if her greeting Highness Zhou like this would have a bad influence on Highness Zhou. At this thought, Shui Yaoyao glanced to the side and saw a few girls pointing at them. Their eyes revealed a sense of gossip, making Shui Yaoyao twist her fingers uncomfortably. Chapter 155. Shui Yaoyao nodded. After seeing the young man's smile, she felt a lot braver. Fujiu curled up her lips and handed the lunchbox to Shui Yaoyao. This is breakfast made by the Almighty. Try it, it's pretty good. This. Shui Yaoyao subconsciously glanced at the car behind the young man and thought to herself, Your Highness Zhou, aren't you afraid that Almighty Qin will be unhappy when he sees you giving me Almighty Qin's breakfast? Fortunately, the car only paused for a moment before driving away indifferently, which was very much in line with its owner's personality. In Shui Yaoyao's eyes, there was indifference. But in the driver's eyes, their young master's eyes were extremely cold. Even the surrounding temperature dropped. Qin Mo supported his chin with one hand, watching the two figures getting further and further away in the rearview mirror. The corner of his mouth lifted, but there was no warmth in it. At this moment, Shui Yaoyao had just finished pondering. The Almighty's breakfast. Could it be? Your Highness Zhou, did you sleep in the great god's house last night? Fujiu stretched herself and nodded. His Highness Zhou was really handsome, which was why the students kept stopping and looking at him excitedly. But His Highness Zhou was actually living in the Almighty's house. What kind of relationship did they have to be that good? Shui Yaoyao thought about how they played badminton yesterday, especially the scene where Almighty Qin leaned over and pinched Highness Zhou's chin. Wait a minute. No. She couldn't think too much. Even if Highness Zhou lived in the great god's house, it didn't mean that they had that kind of relationship, right? But if there really was something, Shui Yaoyao's face turned serious, her eyes shining. Your Highness Zhou, I will bless you and Almighty Qin. Two equally handsome people together would be the most suitable. Even if they were not understood by many people, as long as His Highness Jiao liked them, she would support them. Fu Jiao was confused by Shui Yaoyao's stare, so she changed the topic. How was your hero practice yesterday? It's all right, but I can't increase my speed. Just practice a few more times and you'll be fine. Which internet cafe do you usually go to? Let's make an appointment today. We'll let you meet our other teammate and reward you with a punch of pleasure. Yao Yao. Fu Jiao understood why Shui Yaoyao had such an expression after hearing this name. She reached out and patted her shoulder. Get used to it. Shui Yaoyao was still trying to accept it. After all, she never imagined that one day she would be related to the rich man who flirted with girls and threw money around. Your Highness Jiao, how did you get to know this awarding you a punch of pleasure? I heard that he only takes girls to clear dungeons. Fu Jiao smiled casually. I met him during the competition, and he even treated me to hot pot. During the competition? Shui Yaoyao paused, as if she thought of something, and said, Your Highness Jiao, have you been playing hero for a long time? Fu Jiao unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. To her, any game is used to train her hand speed. Then what's your in-game name? Even now, Shui Yaoyao still remembers the beautiful finger technique that His Highness Jiao used when he was teaching her yesterday. He was definitely an expert among experts. But in the broadcast of all the major teams, she couldn't find anyone who was similar to His Highness Jiao. His Highness Jiao, who exactly is he? Chapter 156. Hearing that, Shui Yaoyao was completely stunned. Her heart felt like it had been pierced by those 4 words. Spade Z. The new player king who won countless first clears as soon as he debuted. The almighty in Zone C who broke countless records but was obsessed with his whereabouts. The top player who broke all the rules, acted alone, and didn't listen to any team. Shui Yaoyao had heard of this name many times. Sometimes when she was playing games, she would often see this person on the ranking list and tell herself, look, not everyone in this world who doesn't have money will be buried. Spade Z was such an example. His finger skills were beautiful, unexpected, and he was the king. All the esports media in Jiang City wanted to get the first-hand information on this person. But he was invisible. Some people said that Spade Z must be very ugly, which was why he was afraid to show his true face. Otherwise, how could he not accept such a good opportunity to be famous? Even if it was just a live broadcast, he could earn 100,000 yuan. Others said that even if Spade Z looked okay, he was definitely not young. Looking at his skillful operation and his familiarity with all kinds of tricks in the game, he must be an uncle-level man. But he was him. Shui Yaoyao covered her mouth. She never thought that the person who was like a benchmark for her was their Highness Jiao. Even though she was already sitting in the classroom, Shui Yaoyao still couldn't calm down. If the girls in school knew about this, they would go crazy. Highness Jiao, he was not some nouveau riche trash at all. He was not only gentle and handsome, but he was also the almighty and hero. Shui Yaoyao looked sideways at the young man's clean and handsome side profile, and she couldn't help but murmur, if the anti-fans knew that Spade Z looked like this, the game would explode. And those reporters would take back their guesses about Spade Z's appearance. Highness Jiao, why don't you accept the interview? Because it's not the right time yet. Fu Jiao twirled the carbon pen and smiled lightly, but there was a hint of blackness brewing in her eyes. Shui Yaoyao didn't know what Fu Jiao was planning. She thought that she needed some time to digest this exciting news. Ever since she started playing hero, she never thought that she would meet Spade Z one day. Because she knew very well that the decision was made by a god different from mortals. But now, she actually wanted to follow him and form a team to play in the professional competition. What kind of feeling was that? Those who had never played games would never understand. Her heart was in a mess, and even her blood was boiling. She felt like she had finally started to realize her dream. This was the first time she was so close to it, and it was all given to her by the young man. Fu Jiao didn't understand the effect she had on Shui Yaoyao. She was still looking at the physics questions that the Almighty had given her yesterday. I'll be relying on it for my monthly exams in a few days. Ding 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 ding. The bell rang. After the physics teacher came in, he didn't call people to answer questions like before. Instead he looked at them, coughed softly, and said, Today, we will rearrange the tables. Men and women can't sit at the same table. Now, we will start to form groups freely. The students were all dumbfounded. He listened to the mournful wails below. It can't be. We've just finished lining up. Why are we lining up again? It wasn't easy for me to get close to my goddess, yet you still insist that men and women can't sit at the same table. Although the English teacher had praised Fujio for a long time the last time they met, Fujio didn't know what to say. But in the eyes of the physics teacher, Fujio was still the one who pulled down the average score of their class. It was not discrimination, but the physics teacher felt that good positions should be reserved for good students. All right, since everyone has chosen their seats, let's start the class. The physics teacher clapped his hands, and the rest of the people retracted their gazes. Jiang Feiyong looked at Fujio and hesitated, but he didn't go over. Chapter 158. In the end, only the seat next to Fujio was empty. It was obvious who Shui Yaoyao was going to sit with. The other two girls also supported her. After all, His Highness Jiao was sitting in that corner, but the teacher didn't say a word. Some people also pretended not to see anything, and the vague sense of exclusion was still there. In school, grades were the most important thing. They all knew this. But they really didn't want to see His Highness Jiao sitting alone in the corner. The physics teacher obviously didn't understand what these students were thinking, and his voice became a bit cold. I've already made it very clear that men and women can't sit together. Shui, you should know your situation. Getting into a good university is your only way out. Don't think about those unrealistic things. Read more books when you have time. Sit down. Shui Yaoyao still wanted to say something. Fujio looked up and gave her a "don't worry" look. She smiled at her, which clearly meant that it was okay to sit in the back row. But this physics teacher seemed to be very prejudiced against her. If it was for studying, Fujio wouldn't have bothered the teacher. It was a matter of principle. She didn't know if it was because of studying with the Almighty for a whole night, but she could actually understand a little bit in this class. But the physics teacher didn't hit the main points in class. Simply put, he was a little inferior to the Almighty. Maybe it wasn't the teacher's ability, but the Almighty was too inhuman. Fujio once again thought about the material she had read in the Qin family study. Criminal psychology, logical reasoning, forensic general knowledge. Ordinary people probably wouldn't read these books often. While Fujio was deep in thought, Shui Yaoyao saw that the young man didn't look unhappy, so she calmed down. She knew that whether it was the students or the teacher, the impression of His Highness Jiao as a good-for-nothing was long ingrained. She had experienced this feeling of being isolated before, so she wanted to sit at the same table as His Highness Jiao. But obviously, His Highness Jiao wasn't her. That person had an incomparably strong heart. He never cared about being excluded or isolated. Just like now, he was holding his chin and taking notes in class, as if he didn't care where he sat. One day, when people knew His Highness Jiao's true identity, they would know that he was never a good-for-nothing. It was good to have one person at a table. Fujio could log into the game very smoothly, and she didn't have to deliberately avoid anyone. After all, she was using Almighty Qin's account, and it would only be troublesome if someone peeped at her. Usually, it was very difficult to find a player's exact location without adding them as friends. But to Fujio, this was nothing. She used her micro-data control to lock onto "awarding you a slap of pleasure," and sent a message through the Alliance's platform. Are you there? Feng Shang, who was still playing games, was startled. He thought he had been poisoned, but when he saw that the person who spoke was his idol, he immediately perked up. Yes. Let's meet at West Town Internet Cafe at 7 p.m. tonight. Fujio typed lazily, let's work together to clear a dungeon. Feng Shang had never been to an internet cafe before. Just the thought of teaming up with real people to clear a dungeon made him excited. All right, we'll listen to our idol. Chapter 159. After Feng Shang received Fujio's last message, he immediately stood up from his chair. She began to pick out her clothes very seriously. The last time he met his idol was too coincidental. Not like this time. Strictly speaking, they were going to have a gay meetup. Moreover, It was not a one-on-one game meetup, but a team meetup. Although Feng Xiang had never met anyone in the game, he had read quite a few novels about them. It was a team meetup, and the feeling was like he was about to see the girl he loved. Even his heart was beating faster than usual. Needless to say, Feng Xiang was really excited, so much so that he went to the entrance of the internet cafe an hour earlier to wait. Anyone who had lived in the north would understand the feeling of the cold wind blowing on the face at the end of autumn, bringing with it a little pain. However, none of this could stop Feng Xiang's blood from boiling. However, the driver who dropped him off came back uneasily. He rolled down the window and said, "Second young master, do you want to wait inside?" "No." Feng Xiang was very insistent. "I want to give them a surprise. Go, don't let my brother know about this." The driver had no choice but to drive the car away. If he did this twice, the boss would definitely notice. He locked the computer, pushed open the door, and walked out. "Hey, little brother, what are you doing standing outside?" I'm waiting for someone." Feng Xiang was still stuttering. The owner of the internet cafe pushed the door open. "Waiting for someone? A gay meetup? Then come in. My shop has big windows. If you stand inside they can see you." Feng Xiang's eyes widened. How did you know that I'm here for a meeting?" "In my internet cafe, there are 3 or 4 people meeting up every day to play hero. It's not rare for real people to play together." The owner of the internet cafe held the cigarette in his mouth and looked a little roguish. However, he managed to convince Feng Xiang. At that moment, he seemed to understand why his idol had chosen to meet here. The boss was a good person. After another half an hour, when Fu Jiu walked in with Shui Yaoyao, she saw student Feng holding a cup of milk tea and stuttering with the owner. "It seems like you've been doing well when I wasn't around." Fu Jiu took off her school jacket as she walked and threw it on the sofa. It was a little hot in the internet cafe, so she had to take it off. The boss looked up at the young man and said, "So it's your friend. But let me say this first. This milk tea costs money." "Sure, how much is it?" "I'll pay you after the game." Fu Jiu blinked her left eye, looking very handsome. Feng Xiang was a little embarrassed. I didn't bring any cash when I came out, so. You treated me last time, so I'll treat you this time. We still have to work together later. So let's have dinner at the internet cafe. The fast food here is pretty good." Fu Jiu even complimented the person along the way. The boss had a cigarette in his mouth and was very happy. "Sure, write down what you want to eat, and I'll get someone to make it for you." "Did you hear that?" Fu Jiu smiled faintly and turned her head. "I forgot to introduce you. Yao Yao, this is Feng Xiang. You can also ask him to give you a punch of pleasure." Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She thought that according to the style of awarding you a slap of pleasure in the game, he would be a tough man with a deep voice or a big burly man who could dig feet. But who would have thought that he would end up like this? Cough. Student Feng coughed heavily and said very seriously, I've already recharged money in the game. I'll bring you to play dungeons, and I'll bring you to fly." Chapter 160. Shui Yaoyao didn't want to laugh, but she couldn't help it after hearing what he often said in the game. "Okay." Feng Xiang thought that this girl brought by his idol was easy to get along with. It was the first time that Shui Yaoyao met a guy who didn't mind her being fat. She felt his friendliness, and her nervousness disappeared. "I'm not good at it. Please teach me later." Feng Xiang said, No problem. If you can't pass, you can use money. With me here, how can you not pass?" Fu Jiu stood up with a lollipop in her mouth. She curved her thin lips, clenched her right hand into a fist, and stretched it out. "Let's go. Let's shock Zone C." Looking at the fist in front of them, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Xiang looked at each other. They stretched out their hands and pressed against each other. Just like that, a dark horse team that would shock the esports selection contest was formed in the internet cafe. The 3 of them sat handsomely in a row, all wearing black headphones. Among them, Fu Jiu's fingers were undoubtedly the most beautiful. From logging into the game to accepting orders, she did it all in one go. It was mealtime, so there weren't many people in the internet cafe. Usually, there would be a large number of people entering after 8 o'clock. "We're still missing one person." Fu Jiu wore headphones and looked sideways at Feng Shang. Call them on the bulletin board. Ever since the boss found out that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, he wanted to see the young man play with his own eyes. Now that he heard that they were missing one person, he put his cigarette into the ashtray and said, "Do you think I can do it?" Fu Jiu turned around and saw him. She smiled. Of course. There was another name in the team. Although it wasn't on the leaderboard, it was of a high level. It seemed like it hadn't been played for a long time. The owner of the internet cafe typed quickly, "Open it." The four of them each had their own specialties. Fu Jiu was the main attacker, and every move she made was fatal. She calmly commanded everyone and put them in their proper positions. In such a small internet cafe, the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard sounded. No one knew that a team was about to be born here. It was only a short half an hour. First kill completed. A dazzling silver light appeared on the screen. Along with the sound of the special effects, someone who was surfing the net pushed the door open and walked in. F***CK. Who got the first kill? This voice was really emotional. The owner of the internet cafe stood up and swiped his ID card to open the computer. Then, another group of people walked in. At this time, the internet cafe was completely lively. Fu Jiu, who originally wanted to eat here, also gave up on the idea. She glanced at Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao and took off her headphones. "Shall we find a place outside to talk?" The two of them naturally agreed. There were too many people in the internet cafe, so it was inconvenient to talk. When Fu Jiu walked past the cashier counter, she paused and said to the owner of the internet cafe inside, "Are you interested in playing professional matches with me?" "Me? Professional competition?" The owner of the internet cafe choked on the smoke in his mouth. Cough. "I can't take it anymore. I'm too old. Don't you see the pro players on TV? They're all young." Chapter 161. There's no need to play. The boss removed the cigarette and placed it between his fingers. With a mischievous look on his face he said, "If it's to win a prize or something, I might consider it." Fu Jiu laughed. "How can winning an award be enough? If we don't shock the esports world, why should we play games? Think about it." Hearing that, the owner's pupils contracted. Someone playing a game shouted, "Boss, give me a bottle of water." "He's coming." With a cigarette in his mouth, the boss took out a bottle of mineral water from the fridge and glanced at Fu Jiu. "Take me with you during the competition." Fu Jiu smiled. "Okay." Shui Yaoyao watched the scene from the side. She didn't say anything at first, but after they walked out of the internet cafe, she said, "The boss's ultimate move was amazing. I didn't even move, and the monsters in front of me were all killed. It's a stealth expert." Feng Shang's eyes lit up when he said this. I really didn't expect the boss of a small internet cafe to be so good at playing games." Fu Jiu chuckled. His right fingers are more agile than his left, and when he's holding something, his index finger will subconsciously tap the side. This is a habit formed by people who play games often. He used to be in a professional team, but only he knows why he left. "Idle you couldn't have seen through him from the start." Even though Feng Shang hadn't finished his sentence, Fu Jiu had already understood what he meant. "I noticed it the first time I came to this internet cafe. The boss was still tinkering with the computer. Otherwise, why do you think I invited you here?" In the end, Fu Jiu's handsome face had a handsome arc. Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao looked at each other. They were almost certain that the owner of the internet cafe felt that he had been tricked by His Highness Jiu, idol. However, to be able to determine a person's class through a single movement, this was simply too overpowered. "Why are you all looking at me?" Fu Jiu put on the black mask and put her hands in the pockets of her uniform. Her eyes were still smiling. "Let's find a place to eat." Feng Shang nodded and said, It's such a cold day. Eat something warm. Why don't we go to my house and eat hot pot?" "Your house is a bit far, so let's go. I still need to go back and study physics after eating." Fu Jiu's heart ached at the thought of this. Shui Yaoyao didn't care where she ate. She had never had the chance to eat with people in the game before. Feng Shang felt the same, and he followed Fu Jiu excitedly. Just as the three of them were about to cross the road, A group of people walked over from the other side of the sidewalk. Every one of them was wearing the clothes of a professional team. They were all above the standard height, so even their aura was very strong. The one in the lead was Fu Jiu's old enemy, her agent Du Zhe. Other than Du Zhe, there was also Fu Ximing. As usual, Du Zhe was like a lackey. He was dressed like a proper person and blocked the path on the left for Fu Ximing. "Young master, this way, this way." Fu Ximing also saw Fu Jiu at this moment. His face was cold and arrogant, as if he didn't want to talk to Fu Jiu at all. He strolled over. Chapter 162. Some people in that team knew Fu Jiu. After all, some of them were from He Honghua's team. Their impression of Fu Jiu had always been that useless person who only knew how to throw money at people and had no ability at all. Someone is really carefree. He still has the mood to come to the internet cafe. He's just a useless wastrel. How much do you expect him to achieve? It seems like it was right for us to leave the company. With He Honghua's love for her son, sooner or later, we will be in trouble. Shui Yaoyao knew that they were talking about His Highness Jiu. She tilted her head and looked at the young man. Fu Jiu was still wearing a mask, but her deep eyes were very bright. They were like the ice in the winter, cold and bone-chilling. What kind of people are together? I heard from my classmates this afternoon that someone found a big fat pig as his girlfriend. Now it seems like it's true. Fu Jiu didn't move at first. But after hearing that, Shui Yaoyao saw the young man raise his leg and kick that team member who was about to pass by them. The action was very fierce and very handsome. There was a loud bang. That team member covered his knee. He was in so much pain that his face turned pale. Don't talk if you don't know how to talk. Fu Jiu's hands were still in the pockets of her school uniform. Her side profile was indifferent. At least don't talk *T. You. The others in the team couldn't take it anymore. They raised their fists and were about to throw them at Fu Jiu. Stop. Fu Ximing's cold voice rang out. Do you know what the consequences will be if you start a fight in front of everyone while wearing these clothes? Tomorrow, your pictures will appear in the esports tabloids. Come back. A person who can't even pass the exam is not worth your time. The team members tugged at their bags indignantly and pointed at Fu Jiu. Feng Shang was still rolling up his sleeves. This was the first time he fought with his friends, so he was very proactive. I idle, do you need me to fight? No need. Fu Jiu curled up her lips and smiled. It's not fun to fight them here. Feng Shang was a little confused. Then where should we fight? Did they need to jump to a place to fight? He had never fought before, so he had no idea. In the game. Fu Jiu looked up. Through the mask, her voice carried the charisma of a king. Let's crush them in the esports selection contest. A gust of wind blew past, brushing away the silver hair on her forehead, revealing a faint glow. However, that group of people still didn't know that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, and they were still indignant. Young Master Fu, are we going to let that kid off just like that? Did you hear what he just said? Spouting shit? It's obvious that he doesn't put you in his eyes. The team members obviously wanted to vent their anger. In the past, they didn't like that piece of trash in the company. They tolerated him for the sake of getting paid. Now that they were no longer working under He Honghua, why should they tolerate him? Chapter 163. Brilliant. Young Master Fu's idea is brilliant. The tallest member gave a thumbs up and glanced at the teammate next to him. The two of them had a poisonous look on their faces. That trash's good days were about to come to an end. It was true that Fu Ximing didn't take Fu Jiu seriously. It was just that the mouse incident last time made him feel that it was time to teach her a lesson. Did she really think that he was still that illegitimate child who didn't know how to speak up after being wronged? It was time for everyone to see who the real young master of the Fu family was. Fu Ximing didn't understand at all. His Lord Jiu had always disdained to fight with him for the title of young master of the Fu family. When the team had a gay meetup, they would drink if they passed. Fu Jiu's first words were, "A dozen ice Budweisers," which was very down to earth. Feng Shang felt that ever since he followed his idol, all the firsts were gone. Like gay meetups, like fighting, like... Drinking. If you're not used to it, drink less. Fu Jiu's drinking posture was very evil. Feng Shang looked at it and said seriously, "Idol, believe me, I can do it." "Oh, then you drink it." After Fu Jiu said that, she stretched out her hand and said, "Boss, give me another dozen." Feng Shang froze. Again. Tell me about everyone's good points. After Fu Jiu entered the zone, she really looked like a CEO in the business world. She dipped her finger in wine and tapped it on the table. "Feng Shang, you're fast. When the match starts, stand in this position. You're mainly responsible for defending and healing." "Yao Yao you." The youth's face looked very youthful and clean, but at that moment, they felt that the youth was not an ordinary high school student. It was like a mature soul living in a young body. She didn't know why she felt this way. But the young man's orders always made people involuntarily submit to him, as expected of their Royal Highness Jiu. With such a captain, there was nothing to be afraid of even in the esports selection contest, where there were many experts. Shui Yaoyao smiled. Her round face was slightly red, perhaps because she was drunk, or perhaps because she was full of anticipation for the competition. At this moment, in Rivertown No. 1 Middle School, a familiar black Lincoln limousine was parked at the side of the road. There were several bodyguards standing around it, each of them wearing a black Bluetooth headset for easy communication. Regardless of whether it was the car or the people, they all exuded an unapproachable aura. Even so, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the students at the school gate. Many girls were tiptoeing and taking pictures with their phones. The driver stood outside and glanced at the watch on his wrist. He seemed to be in a hurry. With a troubled expression, he said to the person sitting in the car, "CEO Qin, it's been half an hour. Should we leave now?" Ninth young master should have returned home by now. Qin Mo held the physics information in his hands, his long fingers tapping on it. His lips curved upwards, but his gaze was frighteningly cold. "Should?" The driver immediately said, "I'll ask again." "No need." Qin Mo casually tossed the physics book to the side, crossing his legs elegantly. His perfect side profile seemed to be coated with a layer of ice. "Come up, drive." The driver hesitated for a moment and said, "Aren't you going to wait for young Master Jiu?" Chapter 164. The driver didn't dare to say anything more. He immediately turned around and got into the car. His hand holding the steering wheel was still a little unsteady. He could tell that the young master was not in a good mood. After all, he had been the Qin family's chauffeur for so long, and he had never seen the young master wait for anyone like this. In the end, the person that the young master was waiting for didn't appear. Of course, he knew that the young master was. Sigh, it was hard to say. Turn left ahead. When Qin Mo's low voice came from behind, the driver was confused. Turn left? Go straight to the Fu family. Qin Mo's eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation, but it was so dark that it seemed like it could emit a cold mist. To the Fu family? The driver couldn't hide the surprise on his face. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said after a while, "Yes." But going to the Fu family without informing young Master Jiu was not in line with young Master Fu's usual style. No, that's not right. It should be said that the young master had never been to someone's house before. Why did young master want to go to the Fu family? Should he ask his wife to call the other party's wife first? But it was so sudden. They usually didn't have any contact with the Fu family, and they didn't have any contact information at all. Qin Mo didn't know what the driver was thinking. Right now, Almighty Qin's idea was very simple. Catch that guy and teach him a lesson. Achoo! Fu Jiu was having a good time drinking, but for some reason, she suddenly sneezed. Feng Shang was already swaying left and right. His face was also red. "Idol, how did you become two?" "Because you're drunk." Fu Jiu held the glass of beer and drank the last mouthful. She looked up and said, "Boss, come check out." Shui Yaoyao was surprisingly a good drinker. She drank 3 bottles of wine and nothing happened. After Fu Jiu handed over the money, she tilted her head and said to Shui Yaoyao, "This guy should come with me. If he goes back in this state, his brother will definitely question him." I'm not afraid of my brother." Feng Shang, who was originally drunk, suddenly sobered up. I was just being obedient." Fu Jiu nodded and said half-heartedly, Yeah, you're the most obedient. As he spoke, he pulled her arm over his shoulder. Dressed in his school uniform, he didn't look any less handsome. Let's go. Hail a cab and ask the driver to go to your house first. All right. Shui Yaoyao didn't stand on ceremony with Fu Jiu. After she hailed a taxi, she sat in the front seat and looked back at the back seat. Your Highness Jiu, is Feng Shang okay? Fu Jiu rubbed Feng Shang's head. Don't worry, I'm here. All boys will react like this when they drink for the first time. Out of the three of them, His Highness Jiu drank the most. He had probably drunk 8 or 9 bottles, but His Highness Jiu didn't seem to have any reaction at all. This really doesn't seem like a high school student. Shui Yaoyao's house wasn't very far. After going there once, Fu Jiu was familiar with the route. After sending the girl back, she said to the driver, Return to Xing Road. It would take some time to walk, especially since there was a drunkard sitting next to him. Fortunately, this drunkard was quite cute. His every move was acting, and he was simply a mascot. This is not the way back to my house. Feng Shang leaned against the car window, his handsome face distorted. Chapter 165. 7 p.m. at night. The sky was already dark. The northern region had started its own smog. All the roads in Jiang City entered the rush hour. In the living room of the Fu family. Ever since Qin Mo came in, Chen Xiaodong didn't know where to put his hands. He stood stiffly at the side. You mean your young master isn't back yet? Qin Mo sat on the sofa, his tone calm. He took off his gloves slowly, exuding an aura of nobility. Chen Xiaodong couldn't think of a reason why young Master Qin would appear at his house. Even if his young master angered him, young Master Qin wouldn't come personally to capture him. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Should he call his young master first? MMH. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows when Chen Xiaodong didn't reply. Chen Xiaodong felt his scalp go numb. Yes, my young master said he was going to sleep at a friend's place last night. He hasn't come back yet. Why don't I go to the nightclub to look for my young master? Maybe he's back to his old habits? He couldn't figure out what his young master was busy with recently. Qin Mo smiled when he heard this. If your young master really went to the nightclub, then he doesn't need to come back today. It was originally a very ordinary sentence, but Chen Xiaodong didn't know why, but he actually heard the coldness in it. Why? Chen Xiaodong didn't understand what was wrong with going to the nightclub. After all, it was normal for his young master to go to the nightclub. I came in a hurry this time, so I didn't bring any gifts for Boss He. Qin Mo spoke again, polite and indifferent. His face was noble and handsome no matter how you looked at it. Boss He probably isn't back yet. Chen Xiaodong quickly nodded. Yes, Madam is on a business trip. She'll be back in Jiangqing City in 2 days. Was young Master Qin going to leave? That was great. Even though young Master Qin was handsome, he felt pressured at such a close distance. Thinking up to this point, Chen Xiaodong decided to respectfully send young Master Qin out. However, he didn't expect this. Where's your young master's room? Qin Mo stood up with one hand in his trousers and the other holding a physics book. Even his tone was casual. Bring me there. Chen Xiaodong. The darkness of the night grew thicker. When the taxi driver finally dropped Fu Jiu off, Feng Shang walked around in a daze. Fu Jiu grabbed him by the sleeve and dragged him into the Fu family. Fu Zhongyi took almost everything, but he didn't dare to touch the villa. Even the illiterate understood the meaning of marital property. But it was precisely because of this that San Kai refused to let her go. If she didn't enter the Fu family's door, she would never be considered a legitimate wife. Not only did the three know this, but everyone in the business world also knew this. What's more, this villa wasn't cheap. She used so many tricks to poach people from He Honghua. Apart from making He Honghua a laughingstock, there was another reason. She wanted He Honghua to run out of money and have no choice but to sell the villa at a low price. Then, she would be able to take over the villa legitimately. Fu Jiu looked at the brightly lit single-family house in front of her and smiled coldly. Anyone who wanted to destroy her home, She would let them have a taste of what it meant to burn their bones and scatter their ashes. Chapter 166. Her little butler did not even come out to greet her. Fujiu tilted her head in confusion. Since she was still holding on to Feng Shang, she didn't see the only Lincoln in Jiang City parked in the dark. There weren't many people in the hall. Fujiu raised her eyebrows and went straight to the second floor. She wanted to let baby Feng wash his face first. But what she didn't expect was that as soon as she pushed the door open, she saw Almighty Qin, who shouldn't be here, holding the book that was originally on her bookshelf. His handsome godlike face didn't show any emotion. He was sitting on the wooden chair in a very lazy and luxurious posture. He was wearing a pure black suit and Italian leather shoes. His elbows were on one side, and his eyes were as cold as the autumn night outside the window. His voice was indifferent. "You still know to come back?" Fujiu paused for a moment. He did look like a big brother. She had wanted to explain, but student Feng jumped out from behind. Idle. I'll have another drink. After you drink me up, I'll go home with you to sleep." "Go home and sleep." Qin Mo repeated the 3 words and stood up with a faint smile. His eyes were cold. "You're really amazing. You brought the second young master of the Feng family home to sleep with just 1 trip. No wonder you're my younger brother." Almighty Qin's words were definitely the opposite of what he meant. Fujiu was a smart person, so of course she wouldn't do something stupid. She smiled lightly and said, "Our team gathered today, and everyone was happy, so we drank a few more glasses. I was worried about him going home, so I brought him back to my house. Brother Mo, I won't do anything to baby Feng. His big brother will ban me." "I don't know if his big brother will ban you, but if there's a next time." Qin Mo approached slowly, and even his breath hit Fujiu's face. It was extremely cold. "I won't just break your claws, but don't even think about your legs." Hearing that, Fujiu touched the bridge of her nose and glanced at the physics book on the desk. She couldn't help but be stunned. Was he going to tutor her again? Speaking of which, even if the Almighty wanted to tutor her, he would definitely go to school and not to her house. Could it be that after he went to school, he didn't wait for her and then came to her house? Only then did Fujiu realize how serious the situation was. A businessman who valued time like the Almighty rarely waited for others. With the Almighty's personality, he would definitely find a way to get back at her. But Qin Mo didn't seem to be in a hurry to deal with Fujiu. He turned sideways and took out his phone. He looked at her and dialed a number with his slender fingers. Manager Feng, who was still attending the party with his team, was stunned when he saw the caller. President? When had his Almighty ever called him? He would call 5 times before the other side would pick up one. Sometimes the Almighty would say, "Feng Yi, don't call me if it's nothing important, understand?" At that time, he really wanted to smash his phone. But now, humph. Manager Feng coughed seriously and deliberately lowered his voice, trying to create a sense of maturity. "Boss Qin, what's the matter?" The person on the other side of the phone seemed to be laughing. "Feng Yi, I'll give you 20 minutes to come to the Fu house and pick up your drunk brother. If he doesn't arrive after 20 minutes, you can directly buy a plane ticket and fly to South Africa. I will pack up your brother and send him to you. How about that? How about that?" What kind of place was South Africa? A country where people could only eat dirt. Chapter 167. Feng Shang, who was drunk, seemed to hear someone calling his big brother's name. He immediately straightened his back and sobered up a lot. At least, he recognized who the person standing in front of him was. Young Master Qin. Why was young Master Qin at his idol's house? Didn't his idol say that he would take him home to sleep? Why did he call Almighty Qin here? Feng Shang shook his head. It was a mess. Qin Mo shoved his phone into his pocket and walked over to Feng Shang. His graceful voice was filled with indifference. "Second young master, if I were you, I would stay at home obediently. Even if I like to play, at the very least, I wouldn't go home with anyone so casually. What do you think?" Feng Shang was stupid. Why did he go home with anyone so casually when it came to young Master Qin? Young Master Qin should know how clean he was normally. Why did he have to insult him in front of his idol? As for you. Qin Mo turned his face, reached out his left hand, and pulled Fujio to his side. His voice was still very indifferent, and he looked like a businessman. Take your physics book, sit there and copy the questions 10 times, then we will talk about your drinking today. Fujio didn't even open her mouth. Almighty Qin said casually, you don't want me to guess the questions for you? Fujio immediately gave up the idea of saving baby Feng. She walked to her desk resolutely. Copy the questions. Feng Yi arrived at the Fu house very quickly. He was really afraid that Boss Qin would send him to South Africa to dig for diamonds. He wouldn't even have water to drink, let alone entertainment facilities. But there was one thing he was very confused about. Why did he come to the Fu house to pick someone up? The most important thing was, when did his brother learn how to drink? After Feng Shang saw his brother, he was no longer confused. Unfortunately, the old driver of the Feng family was still waiting at the internet cafe. No one would have thought that it would be such a scene. Feng Yi didn't ask Feng Shang anything. After all, looking at Boss Qin's expression, he didn't want them to stay any longer. Just like that, Feng Shang's dream of sleeping with his idol was completely ruined. Not only that, when he returned home, his brother would probably tell his mother about him drinking, and his mother would then tell the rest of the family. Feng Shang thought about it again and again, but he still felt that young Master Qin calling his brother to pick him up wasn't very nice. He was planning on chatting with his idol under the covers until dawn. Why did young Master Qin always have to ruin his dreams? Student Feng felt very depressed, but at the same time, he had to lie to his elder brother because he absolutely could not let his brother know that he had participated in the esports selection contest. Outside the Fu residence, Chen Xiaodong didn't dare to appear. In just half an hour, not only had young Master Qin come, but even Manager Feng had made a trip to the Fu residence. If Madame was here, she would definitely find a way to keep Manager Feng. After all, everyone in the city knew that anyone who played games would become famous in Manager Feng's hands. Of course, the best was still young Master Qin. With such a god staying at home, Chen Xiaodong felt that even the air around him was cold. Chapter 168. In the entire Fu family, only He Honghua knew that Fujio was a girl. Even Zhang Xiaodong, who was always by Fujio's side, didn't know Fujio's true gender. This was an important secret, so even in her own house, Fujio's room wasn't filled with cosmetics like other girls. But Fujio was a girl after all. Especially the old Fujio. She had always imagined that one day she could regain her female identity. So in this room, there would always be traces of a girl's existence. In fact, Fujio was quite sensible. She knew that if people found out that she was a girl, she and her mother would be finished. But the old Fujio couldn't stand this kind of life, so she had to cover it up and vent her anger at He Honghua. So much so that she developed the habit of putting the things she secretly bought in the bedside drawer. Since her rebirth, Fujio had been busy playing games, making money, and taking revenge. She didn't have time to deal with these small things. And she didn't think she needed to deal with them. But now, Fujio looked sideways, and her finger slid over her glowing lips. Her youthful side profile was still so beautiful that it made people's hearts beat faster. The Almighty couldn't find out, right? But Fujio forgot that there was a law in this world called Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law meant that the things people were most worried about would happen. After noticing the young man's gaze, Qin Mo followed his gaze to the bedside. With one hand in his trousers, his deep eyes were cold. You seem to have been staring at the bedside since just now. Have I? Fujio turned around in her swivel chair and smiled. Qin Mo walked over to her and bent his waist down. He placed both his hands on the table behind her in a beautiful posture. A lock of black hair fell in front of his sharp eyes, imprinted on his handsome face, adding to his arrogance and untamed nature. In an instant, the man's minty cigarette scent filled her mouth and nose. It was the same scent that occasionally emitted from his suit, quiet and cold. Fujio didn't move, but raised her head with an evil smile. Qin Mo's eyes were like a deep whirlpool in the night, especially when he looked at her. The posture of the two of them was really not ordinary. So when Chen Xiaodong wanted to come in with the tea, he was scared back. What did he see? Young Master Qin was kissing their young master. He must have been mistaken. That's right, How is this possible? From the back, it was indeed an ambiguous angle. In addition, both of them were very handsome, so it was inevitable that people would think in that direction. Especially when Fu Jiu put her hands on the chair and deliberately lifted herself up. She said to Qin Mo's lips, "Brother Mo, I find you especially handsome today, really." When dealing with an opponent, there were times when it was useless to always use attacking methods. Compliments were the most useful when the other party was angry. But in the next second, he freed his left hand and lightly patted the youngster's adorable face. It was rare that he wasn't mocking her. "You have a sweet mouth, but you seem to have forgotten something." Qin Mo retracted his arm from Fu Jiu's back, and his magnetic voice continued unhurriedly, "I studied psychology." Chapter 169. At this moment, Qin Mo looked even more dangerous than usual. Usually, he would cover it up with elegance, but now, he looked at the bedside with an indescribable gloominess in his eyes. In fact, when he saw Fu Jiu bringing the drunk Feng Shang upstairs, Qin Mo's eyes couldn't warm up anymore. No matter what the reason was, it was a fact that while he was waiting for the youngster was still out drinking and having fun. Thinking of this, Qin Mo's eyes turned colder. He walked towards the bedside, and his eyes swept up before finally locking on the bottom drawer. Such meticulous and precise reasoning didn't look like someone who had only studied psychology. It was like a forensic doctor looking for evidence. Fu Jiu watched as his slender fingers pulled open that drawer with a swish. There were a few items for young girls, especially the ones for the underwear, which were very trendy. There were a few lace ones, and all of them popped out with this action. At that moment, there was only one thought in Fu Jiu's mind. That was, she was going to be screwed. No matter how indifferent Qin Mo was, when he saw this scene, he also paused in surprise. Then, he used the carbon pen in his hand to pick up one of the black ones. He looked at Fu Jiu coldly with the aura of a third-generation soldier. "I didn't expect you to have such a wide range of interests. Shouldn't you explain to me, your big brother, why do you have such things in your room?" Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes, and a light flashed through them. She walked over with a smile on her face, looking very naughty. "Brother Mo, you are a man, so you should understand. Men always have one or two female confidants." "Female confidant?" The smile on Qin Mo's lips became colder. He threw that thing away, and even his eyebrows seemed to be filled with disdain. "Aren't you afraid of getting sick?" Fu Jiu said it as if it were the truth. "Brother Mo, we didn't do anything. That woman only slept in my room for 2 days and left something behind. She said that it would be more convenient the next time she comes." Qin Mo's handsome and ascetic face didn't look any better because of this explanation. Instead, his eyes emitted a dark, fog-like light. He looked at the youngster and pinched Fu Jiu's chin with his fingers. He used a lot of strength, and when his fingers, which were covered with black gloves, scratched Fu Jiu's skin, it caused a series of pain. "I really underestimated your womanizing ability." The wider Qin Mo's smile, the colder the surrounding air became. "There are men and women." Fu Jiu dodged his move and smiled. "We are all friends who play together. I'll be more careful next time." "Do you think there's a next time?" Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. She was handsome, but why was she so infuriating? Fu Jiu blinked. How else could she answer? However, it was fortunate that her usual style was like this, so she could think of such a good excuse in a flash. No one knew how complicated her feelings were when she saw those things coming out. If the Almighty found out that she was a woman, the Almighty would definitely sneer and strangle her to death. Chapter 170. Change the sheets. Fu Jiu reminded the Almighty, "It's night time." "Why do you need to change the sheets in the middle of the night?" Qin Mo's lips were full of coldness, and he said simply, "Dirty my eyes." "Okay." Fu Jiu remembered that the Almighty was a neat freak, so she called Chen Xiaodong in. Chen Xiaodong kept signaling his young master with his eyes. In his memory, young Master Qin was kissing his young master just now. He must want to know if it is true. "Get a sheet and change this." Fu Jiu didn't understand her little butler's expression at all. Chen Xiaodong curled his lips desperately. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. What's going on? Chen Xiaodong wanted to give some obvious hints. But young Master Qin, who was leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window and flipping through a book, opened his mouth again. His voice was extremely deep. Take out the things in the drawer and throw them away. Things in the drawer? Chen Xiaodong didn't know what they were. He watched as his young master calmly took out 2 pieces of girl's bra. Young master, how could we have these things in our house? Chen Xiaodong cried out in a flash. Fu Jiu explained calmly. They're from a friend. Okay, take them out quickly. The Almighty and I still need to study. If they stayed any longer, her lie of taking a girl home to sleep with her would be exposed. What friend? Young master never had any friends. Okay. Chen Xiaodong, who was pushed out of the door, knew that his young master was fooling him. Young master didn't even look at girls in the past. So how could it be? Chen Xiaodong looked down at the eye-catching clothes in his hands. Could it be that young master was so perverted that he started to fantasize that he was a girl because he wanted to pursue young Master Qin? Chen Xiaodong's eyes widened, and his face turned very ugly. Should he tell Madam about this? No, forget it. Young master had just gotten better, and if he told Madam about such a cruel thing, Madam wouldn't be able to take it. In the room, Qin Mo was still standing in front of the window. Behind him was a thick fog. It was so cold that it seemed to seep into his eyes through the window. No matter where it was, when a man stood there, it felt like an international conference was about to be held. It was just a simple physics lesson. She didn't know how the Almighty grew up to be so noble. It made her curious about the Almighty's mother. Fu Jiu's mind was full of thoughts. Just as she was about to walk over and continue copying the rest of the questions. This is the book you usually read? Qin Mo turned the cover of the book in his hand so that the youngster could see it more clearly. His lips curved into a mocking smile. Overbearing CO falls in love with me. Sleeping with rich young masters, hunting my little sweetheart. Where does the overbearing school hunk escape? Every novel was of the same genre. Cinderella meets Prince Charming. Hey, what good taste. How could Fu Jiu not hear the sarcasm in that graceful voice? She said in all seriousness, my daily life is already so hard. I just want to relax when I'm reading. I don't need to think about such a book. It's just right. Chapter 171. When Fu Jiu heard that, she stretched out her arms. Her school uniform jacket was half over her shoulders, and she raised her pretty eyebrows. Her posture was very devilish and handsome. Brother Mo, I'm so aggressive. Do you think I look like the one on the bottom? Everything looks like it. Qin Mo casually tossed the books to the side. His voice elegant and dignified. You look as though you're being suppressed. Fu Jiu, she really couldn't take this sentence as a compliment. The Almighty's sharp-tongued skills could really cause internal injuries. He's always reading these books. No wonder he got last place. Qin Mo stood tall and slender, his left hand in his pocket. His eyes were filled with mockery towards all the bad students in the world. Since you like these books so much, then read the first 3 pages of each of the 10 books for tonight. The first 3 pages. 10 books. He still had to read 30 pages. The corner of Fu Jiu's mouth twitched a little, then she laughed and said, This will take up Brother Mo's teaching time, so I'd better not do it. Although I like it, I can watch it in private. How sensible. Qin Mo lifted his thin lips, a faint smile on his face. But who told you that it's taking up teaching time? These are all bedtime stories. In your words, your daily life is already so difficult, so you should relax when you read. This kind of book doesn't need to think. It's just right. After physics, read it to me. Fu Jiu, why did she always use her own words against him? Wasn't the Almighty too shameless? What's more, I'm talking about other people's hard lives. Did the Almighty, who drank Voss's mineral water at home, understand what it meant to live a hard life? 100 yuan per bottle was enough for her to drink a box of cola. However, Fu Jiu was very good at catching the main point. Her eyes paused. Before bed? Qin Mo seemed to have been waiting for this question. Their eyes met as he slowly walked towards her. Fu Jiu could even see the light in Qin Mo's eyes. It was definitely not friendly. Fu Jiu's room wasn't as big as Qin Mo's, and the space from the bookshelf to her side was very narrow. Qin Mo's every movement was enough to make people feel his natural pressure. Ninth brother likes to bring people home to sleep, so he probably won't reject my offer to stay the night. He looked at her, his eyes cold, as if he would throw her out of the window if she said the word no. No matter whose house this was. Fujiu always felt that the Almighty was more like the master of the Fu family than she was. His strong aura even made Chen Xiaodong behave himself. But were they going to sleep together again? He had just slept with her yesterday. Although the situation today was different from yesterday. This was the Fu family, her territory, so it was slightly better. But when she woke up in the morning, she still felt that it was too cruel. But the Almighty didn't give her a chance to refuse. He pulled out one of the wooden chairs in front of the desk with his right hand and sat on it lazily. He crossed his legs and looked elegant. His handsome face, which seemed to be cast by a knife, tilted towards the other wooden chair beside him. It was obvious that he wanted her to sit down as well. The Almighty doesn't even need to open his mouth to command people now. Fujiu muttered in her heart, but she didn't resist since she still needed to learn the secrets of physics. Anyway, she was tired of standing all the time. When she sat down, she would think of a good reason to reject the Almighty's request to sleep in her house. Qin Mo glanced at the young man and said faintly, "Last time, I bet on the big questions. This time, I bet on 20 multiple-choice questions." Hearing that, Fujiu immediately changed her mind. Chapter 172. Outside the window, the night sky became darker. Fog filled the air, and even the temperature in the room dropped a little. When Chen Xiaodong came over with the hot tea, he saw that young Master Qin was tutoring his young master in physics. His face was filled with indescribable shock. He really didn't expect his young master to learn. And young Master Qin seemed to be different from what he had imagined. At first, he thought that young Master Qin was here to catch his young master and make him into meat dumplings. But now, it seemed that young Master Qin treated his young master quite well. For some reason, Chen Xiaodong thought of that kiss again and shook his head. He must have seen it wrong. Although he had never kissed before, he knew what it was like. With how calm his young master and young Master Qin were, nothing should have happened. Here, Qin Mo saw that the young man's attention was on the hot tea, so he pulled the back of his head and knocked on the paper on the table with his slender fingers. Dressed in a black suit and a double-breasted coat, he looked like a warlord's young master from the Republic of China period. His side profile was handsome and elegant. Fujiu didn't listen to him. Instead, she put down the carbon pen in her hand. She raised her arm and put it on Qin Mo's shoulder. She turned her head and laughed lightly in his ear. "Brother Mo, what do you think of my little housekeeper? He's been watching you since the beginning. I don't know about your little housekeeper, but I do know that if you insist on talking to me in this position, I will hang you outside the window and let you breathe in the haze of Jiang City." The low and hoarse voice was neither slow nor slow, with a suppressed coldness. Even his eyes were heavy. "Put your paws down." Chen Xiaodong's soul had left his body after seeing this scene before he left. What was going on? Young master. How dare he get so close to young Master Qin? So close, as if they could kiss. After Chen Xiaodong went out, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he paused in front of the door and glanced at the closed door. As if she had seen through his expression, Fujiu also walked out. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "Why are you standing here instead of getting tea and snacks?" "Young master." Chen Xiaodong grabbed Fujiu's arm and pulled her to the side. It wasn't easy for him to speak, so he raised his voice and said anxiously, "Young master, tell me, have you not given up on sleeping with Almighty Qin? I was wondering why young master suddenly became so fond of studying today. It turns out that you have ulterior motives. You purposely let young Master Qin tutor you so that you can have a chance to get close to Almighty Qin. It's getting late, and you can let him sleep. Am I right?" At that moment, Fujiu didn't know how to refute. After all, the other reason she came out was to ask Chen Xiaodong to prepare a guest room for the Almighty to sleep in. "Young master, listen to me once and give up on this idea." Chen Xiaodong was anxious. "With your physique, you can't sleep with Almighty Qin." When Fujiu heard this, her thin lips curled up, and she smiled devilishly. Who says I can't sleep with Almighty Qin? It's just a small case, alright? Just then. Small case? I didn't know I was so easy to sleep with in your mind. Chapter 173. Almighty Qin. Chen Xiaodong looked at the tall figure that appeared at the door, and his voice trembled with fear. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was that his young master was dead meat this time. Fu Jiu was a little stunned. How could she be so precise? If she said something big, the Almighty would definitely appear. Were all people who studied psychology so good at predicting? Qin Mo lifted his eyelids casually. Why aren't you talking? Did a cat bite your tongue? I want to hear how you are going to sleep with me. Fu Jiu turned her head, and her pupils were very serious. I was wrong. Qin Mo crossed his arms in front of his chest, looked the young man up and down and said coldly, Come in. Fu Jiu put her hands in her pockets and smiled carelessly, looking a little devilishly handsome. Chen Xiaodong pulled her back. Young master, why don't we call the police? Will young Master Qin kill you? Fu Jiu laughed. Don't worry, the Almighty will at most get a rope and hang me outside to breathe in the smog. I'm good at fighting. Go cook some supper first, so I can still eat something before I get hung up. Chen Xiaodong. He was very seriously worried, okay? Even now. His young master was still in the mood to joke around. Why was his young master so daring? That was young Master Qin, the one who could crush a person as easily as crushing an ant. As soon as Fu Jiu walked into the room, Qin Mo held her wrist, lowered her body, and said in a low voice, Tell me, should I hang you on a tree branch, or let you run 10 laps outside? Neither is good. Fu Jiu's face was always so handsome and clean that it was hard to concentrate. She smiled, showing her canine teeth. I'm so handsome. What if the smog makes my eyes inflamed? I won't be able to pass my exams, and I won't be able to play games. Then I won't be able to be in the same team as Brother Mo. Qin Mo looked at that harmless, fair, and handsome face in front of him, and thought about it carefully. With such a face, it would indeed be a little inappropriate to stare at a pair of red rabbit eyes. But having eyes inflamed had its benefits. At least it could reduce this guy's public nuisance. If he was any crueler, he would definitely throw this kid out, regardless of whether his eyes were inflamed or not. However, since he had already been raised by him as a younger brother, he had to take good care of him. If he went out looking sickly, he would be the one to lose face. You have a lot of excuses. Qin Mo let go of the youngster. The remaining moisture on his fingertips made him frown. As expected, he wasn't manly enough. Fu Jiu didn't say anything. She took the opportunity to return to her original seat and continued to hold her pen in her mouth. She wrote down her multiple-choice questions with a slight smile on her lips. This kind of retreating in order to advance was really effective for the Almighty. He had to use it more often in the future. Just as Fu Jiu was thinking about this, she saw the man walk over, reach out his left hand from behind her, and close the physics book in front of her eyes. His voice was neither cold nor indifferent. That's all for today. Remember a few more formulas tomorrow. Fu Jiu's silver hair stood up a little. Memorizing formulas? A few of them will be tested. The Almighty's tone sounded like he was talking about what he would be eating tomorrow. As a poor student who had just started, Fu Jiu really couldn't understand. Tomorrow he will ask Yao Yao if all of them who are good at physics are like this. Chapter 174. Sleep? The man looked at her and raised his eyebrows. His slender fingers pulled out a few books from the bookshelf and raised them. Have you forgotten these bedtime stories? Fu Jiu paused, and her whole body froze. Was he really going to read it? Brother Mo, these novels aren't suitable for bedtime stories. Whether it's suitable or not, it's not up to you to decide. Qin Mo's voice was calm. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his suit that didn't have a single wrinkle. He took one out and bit it between his thin lips. He tilted his head and lit it up. I want to listen to it before I sleep today. Fu Jiu, Almighty, you won't be able to make friends if you're so willful. Don't want to read it? Qin Mo chuckled. Or do you want to run 10 laps outside and take in the smog in Jiang City? Fu Jiu reached out and took the book from the man's palm. She smiled. I'm a cultured person, so I should read more books. Are you educated enough to read this kind of book? Qin Mo flicked the youngster's forehead. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes. Brother Mo, don't look down on our romance novels. Do you know how many girls have fallen in love and how many men have chased each other? At this point, Fu Jiu reached out and put her hand on the man's shoulder. Speaking of which, Brother Mo, you really should read more novels like this. It's good for you to get along with girls. Girls? Qin Mo's voice was neither hot nor cold. He sounded like a forensic doctor doing a professional appraisal. His side profile was still handsome and calm. He reached out to untie his tie, exuding an aura of abstinence. Forget about such a troublesome creature. Maybe some of them are good, but some of them will always do all kinds of things to get close to the rich people in their eyes. I think you have a deeper understanding of this than I do. Fu Jiu knew that he was referring to the mistress, but she said, in my opinion, women who destroy other people's families are despicable, but men who can't resist seduction and abandon their wives and children are equally unforgivable. Surprisingly, the Almighty didn't refute her words. Instead, he said indifferently, that kind of person doesn't deserve to be a man. For the first time, Fu Jiu felt that Qin Mo was someone worth befriending. Even though he was black-bellied, he never used despicable means to deal with people outside of the business world. For example, when it came to her, the man had always been very lenient. Otherwise, with the Qin family's power, they could have made it difficult for her to move around in the entire Jiang city the first time they met. But the man didn't. Just like now, most of the time, men in high positions would always blame women when it came to cheating, but they didn't know that the root of the problem was also them. But the Almighty was different. In the Almighty's eyes, a man should be a man. Such a righteous outlook was just like his handsome and noble face, perfect and flawless. As expected, the Almighty was not only suitable as an opponent, but also as a friend. Fu Jiu had regretted exposing her identity as Spade Z too early and not playing more with men. Now that he thought about it, if he could fight side by side with the Almighty, it would definitely be a good thing. Most importantly, the Almighty was rich. But, after this discussion, she was even more certain of one thing. It was best not to let the Almighty know her true gender. Chapter 175. When Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows, there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. No one could tell what she was thinking. She was handsome, and all that was left was her handsomeness. In fact, this was the first time Qin Mo had met someone like the youngster. He seemed evil and did things without any rules. But psychologically, this kind of person was the most difficult to profile. Therefore, it was safest to keep such a scourge by his side. Which one should I read first? Fu Jiu looked at the 10 novels in her hands and found it difficult to choose. Qin Mo came back to his senses. His voice deep and pleasant. Read the one you like the most first. It was said that a person's personality could be deduced from the books they read. In the past, Qin Mo had trusted this professional theory, but now, because of the youngster, he started to doubt the complexity of human nature. Looking at the youngster, he didn't seem like someone who read romance novels. In the end, he was dumber than he thought. Fu Jiu really didn't read these kinds of things. She usually liked to read mystery novels, but there were still remnants of these books in her mind. She pulled out a book that she thought was funny, but in fact, it was a rich and powerful school story. This time, the Almighty was quite polite. He gestured for her to go ahead. With a demonic elegance, he crossed his legs and lay on her bed. His face was indifferent and handsome. His right hand was still wearing the black glove, revealing his fair wrist. It made people feel like he didn't belong in this world. In the past, Fu Jiu didn't think that her bed was small, but now that this man was lying on it, she felt like she should get a new bed. Speaking of which, the Almighty was too tall. It's a novel in the first person. Fu Jiu coughed softly. It's a school novel for rich families. Qin Mo lifted his thin lips, a little mocking. Where are you going, domineering school hunk? Brother Mo, you have a good memory. Fu Jiu leaned over and blinked her beautiful eyes. Qin Mo reached out and pinned the youngster's hat. I asked you to read a bedtime story, not to flirt. My name is Zhang Meili, and I'm a girl that you can see everywhere. Until one day, I transferred to a college called the best in the universe, the world and China, and my dream life began. That day, I fainted in the forest while walking. Then someone appeared, and he was very handsome. His name is Rich Ouyang. Hearing this, the man probably couldn't help it anymore, and his thin lips hooked up into a sneer. Ouyang is rich? Name? Brother Mo, don't worry, the story has just begun. So this Ouyang Yuqian is rich. He's none other than the only son of the dean of the most powerful college in China. He knows how to build spaceships, and he even has a satellite at home. After he saw me faint, he gave me a pile of gold bricks and told me to buy something to eat. But I'm so kind, cute, and pure, how could I take his money? It was Ouyang Yuqian's first time meeting a girl who would reject him like me. From then on, he started circling around me. Although there were many people who liked me, lining up from my class to the school gate, I couldn't bear to reject him, so I agreed to date him for a few days. Pa Chin Mo reached out his hand and pressed the book in Fu Jiu's hand. His voice was indifferent. Buying food with gold bricks? Are you sure you can buy it? But you're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.